All right, guys, welcome back to Course of Action. My guest today is DJ Williams. DJ, what's going on?
Hey Jeff, thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Of course, of course. We got some, we're talking off the air, but we got some good stuff to cover today, including your new book, King of the Night, which is going to come out here in September. We're going to talk about that here in a little bit. But first, let's kind of kick off with, what you used to do and how you got into writing, because you have a little bit of production background.
Yeah, I was born and raised in Hong Kong till I was 15, 16 years old. Spent a good part of my life traveling around the world, doing everything from filming documentaries to taking different teams to some of the poorest places I've ever been. And I found myself when we moved back to the States. uh, through a chain of events, I ended up running a record company for a while. And that was kind of my first dip into the entertainment world. Uh, I worked at that company for about 10 years. And then I ended up taking on a position as a GM for an entertainment company here in Los Angeles. And that was kind of a wild ride. It was three partners were launching the company, and they were doing music, television, and film all at the same time with the launch. And so, as the GM, I worked with the CEO. We ran the business of it. We basically got the company up off the ground. And I knew I was going to transition out of that because I wanted to start my own production company. And so I transitioned out of being the GM at the entertainment company, and a buddy of mine called me up and said, "Hey, we're going to shoot a pilot for a show." And he said, "Why don't you come out and direct the pilot?" And
Okay.
Jeff, I told him, I said, "I've never directed television before." He said, "Look, just show up, act like you know what you're doing, and it's all going to be fine."
Fake it till you
And
make it,
so,
right?
that's right. And so I flew out to Indiana. That's where we shot the show. And I flew out to Indiana. I walk on the set, the whole crew's there. And the first thing they're asking me is, "Okay, where do you want to start?" And I'm thinking, that's a really good question.
At the beginning. Let's
Yeah,
start
I'm
there.
like, well, I kind of turned it around. I said, "So where do you guys want to start?"
Yeah, yeah. Those are good.
Um,
Deflect is always the answer.
yeah, if you're not sure, point at somebody else. So
Well, I really
we had a
value what
great,
you guys think. Tell me where we should begin.
yeah, totally. We had a great crew. We shot the pilot. The pilot ended up getting picked up. And I think when it ran for 10 seasons, and I think kind of at its height, it was syndicated on, I think, 60 channels worldwide. And so all of a sudden, I was an executive producer and director in the TV business, having no idea how I got there. And as the production company evolved, one of our niches, especially before COVID hit, was we would work with producers who had an idea for a show, and our job was to come in, figure out, okay, here's the idea. How do we execute it? How do we shoot a pilot? How do
Hmm.
we go out and pitch it to the studios and the networks and all that? So like A to Z, and how much is it going to cost? And so we did. I think we did probably 12 or 13 pilots before
Wow.
COVID hit. Um, and it was everything from, we had a show in development with Mark Burnett at the time, and Walmart is one of the big advertisers. We had a couple reality show, celebrity shows that we shot. And anyone that's been out here, they know kind of the way the industry works is you can pitch 100 shows and sell one. It's like going to Vegas basically. So we found a good niche because we would help create the pilots, create the show, kind of develop the show idea. Then we'd hand that back to the producers, and we'd go and start creating another show for somebody else.
Hmm.
So that kept us
Keep the
busy.
machine rolling.
Yeah. And so when COVID hit, We were in post production on a show. I think we did post production on about 50 plus episodes that year. But I saw an opportunity just for me as a storyteller, because my heart is and passion. I love storytelling, whether it was music, whether it was on TV, whether it is in print with the books. Um, I wanted to lean more into that than the day in and day out production side. So when COVID hit, that gave me an opportunity to kind of take a step back. And right around that time, I signed a 3-book deal for a young adult series. And then I had just written The Auctioneer, which is the Chase Hardiman origin story. And so all those things kind of happened at the same time. And I just, I've spent the last 3, 4 years I'm writing about 2 books a year, basically, in
Nothing
the
wrong with
midst of
that.
it.
Business is good.
Yeah, it's like everyone. I mean, you know how this is too. You get a book done, you put it out. Everyone's like, "Man, doesn't it feel great? Does it? Can't you just relax?" And and I'm thinking,
Nope.
I've got like another deadline that I'm trying to hit. So
Well,
I
now I got to
actually,
tell everybody in the world about the book. I got
yeah.
to advertise, advertise, advertise. I got to, those first 30 days are crucial. So you got to get on. If you haven't gotten on podcasts, you got to get on more. You got to get on radio, whatever ads you got to run. Like you got to tell the world from the, tallest mountain that you
Oh,
published a book
big,
for that next
big
30
time.
days. And then you, of course, you have the looming deadline of what's next.
Well, and
Right on top of it.
I was balancing writing a young adult series with writing the espionage series. So, and marketing and all that, it's completely different for both of
Sure.
those genres. Where, like with the young adult series, we leaned heavily on Barnes and Noble. I ended up doing, I think, 30 dates with them last year for just the young adult series. And with the espionage series, the Chase Hardiman series, we've leaned more on kind of the Amazon side, and so I don't want to be on the road 30 dates a year for each book. I'll never be home. So I'm like, we had to kind of figure out the best approach, and so far, it's working out, which is good.
That's good. So you kind of got into writing by way of the entertainment industry and producing, but you've traveled a lot to include Africa, and you told me a really funny story about Africa. Well, I don't know if I call it funny, but it was funny to me. But
Oh, it's funny now. I tell you that it's funny now. Well, this ties in with the writing side too. So when all of this is happening, when I was moving from kind of the music business to the television business, right before that, a couple of years before, I guess, we were filming a documentary in Zambia, and at the end of, we were there about 3 weeks. At the end of that trip, a buddy of mine says, "Hey, do you want to go with us? We're going to go to the Zambezi River." And I'm a total city boy, so I'm like, "Yeah, sure, let's go. This will be fun." Not thinking what exactly that means.
Mhm.
So me and another buddy, we meet them at the airport. Little 4-seater Cessna. Jeff, we are flying into the heart of Africa. You're looking out the window, you're seeing giraffes running, zebras,
Like in the
elephants.
movies.
Yeah, it is. It's like National Geographic. And I'm like, so hey, where are we gonna land? And my buddy points out the windshield at like this little dirt road. He's like, right there. Then I started to realize, okay, for 3 days we're going to be staying in tents. No power, no internet, no connection to the outside world. And we go into this camp, and it was so funny because my buddy, he's traveled everywhere. He's like fearless. So he said, "Hey, if you want to stay with me in my tent, feel free. It's not a problem." I said, "No, man, I want my own tent. And so I'm in my tent at like 2:30 in the morning, and I can just hear these animal sounds everywhere. And I'm like, I am the biggest idiot. I want to be in my buddy's tent, you know? So at least there's two of us they have to pick from, you know? I'm by myself. Well, those 3 days we were there, we went out one afternoon, uh, and we were shooting B-roll for the documentary. So we are getting, I mean, we got some amazing stuff. We went out on a boat down the river, and you're filming elephants like running along the side of the shore. Hippos are diving in the water. I mean, you're just all you got to do is hit record, and it's everything's taken care of, you know. Which a funny side story to this was one of the local guides that was taking us down there. We were asking him, you know, kind of like, what movies have you seen? And he kind of looked at us funny, you know, and we're like, well, do you know Tom Cruise? You know, like throwing like actors' names out. He had no idea who these celebrities were. I mean, then you realize you are in a whole nother part of the world, you know.
Yeah.
Well, we went out one afternoon and we're filming, and we come across this male elephant, and he's probably, I don't know, about 50 yards away from us. He's got the tusks, you know, the whole thing, and I'm rolling with the camera, and the guide behind who was driving, he said, "Hey, I can get us closer." I'm like, "No, man, it's cool. I can zoom. Everything's good." He goes, "No, no, let's get a little closer. It'll be better." So before we could object, he drives towards this elephant, and then we realized was getting us too close, because all of a sudden the elephant turns, looks at us, the ears go out, big trumpet sound. Now the elephant is charging us at full speed, and the
Man.
driver is flying in reverse. And Jeff, I am filming the whole time, man, because I'm thinking, if I'm going down, then my wife is going to know exactly what happened,
How it
you
happened.
know?
Got ran over
It's,
by Dumbo.
oh my gosh, it's unbelievable. I mean, I could still picture it in my mind right now. So we're flying backwards, and all of a sudden, the guide slams on the brakes and stands up in the driver's seat. And I'm like, this is the craziest thing I've ever seen. He stands up and starts waving at the elephant. And sure enough, the elephant stops like 5 feet from us, and there's dust going everywhere, you know. I'm still rolling because I'm literally like, okay, I'm about to, you know, we're going to all die. And so we sat there for 5 minutes. No one moved. The elephant didn't move. We didn't move. And I just kept the camera rolling. And after about 5 minutes, the elephant backed up, goes behind a tree. We take off and go back to camp. And you ever had a situation where you're telling someone a story, or you're showing someone something that happened, and you hear that nervous laughter from them? You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. So all the guides in the camp are just laughing, and they're watching the footage back, and they're just going, "Oh my goodness, you guys almost died.
Yeah.
Why did you
We
get so
sure did.
close?" I'm like, that's what I was asking. Why did we get so close?
Yeah, check your boy over here behind the steering wheel. My
I
man
know.
over
It's
here
like
was
that.
driving right at the
Oh my
elephant.
gosh. It's
In
like
no
that was.
continent is that a smart idea.
Oh my gosh, it was crazy. So the third day we're there, we had shot everything. We were leaving the next morning, and I was standing out on the Zambezi River watching these hippos swimming, you know, 100 feet from me probably. And I had this idea to write a novel called The Disillusion, which is was my ended up being my first novel. Um, I had an idea, and I wanted to write about this place that we came across. You know, of course, it was going to be an action adventure. Part of the storyline had to do with human trafficking. And so I had this whole idea like swirling in my brain. And I thought, when I get home, I'm going to write it. Well, you know how it is. You have those experiences, and when you come home, life takes over. You know, you're back into the regular kind of life that you're living. And I put it on the back burner for a while. And then I picked it up maybe a couple of years after that, and I started writing. and I didn't tell anybody I was writing. And so I got the book written, and then I gave it to a friend of mine. At the time, she was the executive producer, or one of the executive producers on Law and Order SVU, Criminal Minds, CSI. And I gave it to her, and I told her, I said, if this isn't any good, the only people that are going to know it exists are you and me. So,
Right.
which, isn't that true about so many writers? I know I'm one of them. It's like you're
Hmm.
self conscious about the story you've created, the characters you've created. It's like
Yeah.
you're constantly like, well, if it's not any good, or, as what's happening now, King of the Night comes out in a couple weeks. Well, I'm waiting for everyone to read it when it comes out. So you're
Yep.
kind of on pins and needles. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's a waiting game.
Yeah. So she read it, as any good writer, uh, it'll happen. She came back to me with some notes. So I went back, I reworked through the manuscript, added in a lot of notes that she had given me, and then ended up putting that out. My first novel, ended up putting it out, and then I ended up doing, I think, a 13 or 14 date tour with Barnes and Noble just out of the gate. And at that time, I was totally indie, and so even to get Barnes and Noble interested, like we had some good momentum going as an indie, and then I was hooked. Once I had gone through the whole process and I had done the tour with them, then I'm like, well, this is what I'm meant to do. I love this process,
Yeah.
from beginning to end. So
Let's talk about the Chase Hardiman series. We're going to talk about this one right here in just a few minutes, but let's start off with the auctioneer, the first one. It's give us a little synopsis of how it started and kind of the origin story.
sure. So a good buddy of mine, he was in the auction business for a long time, and we would talk all the time, and he would tell me some crazy stories about what he encountered as an auctioneer. And as he's talking, I'm like going, this is like mining gold. I'm like, this is a great character that I can start with, but then I want to add in elements of, whether it's James Bond or Jack Reacher or Jason Bourne, and mix it into that world of kind of the high end auction world.
Yeah.
So in the auctioneer, we find Chase Hardiman. He's a former special ops veteran, and he's kind of in that transition period where he's not on missions anymore, and he's on the verge of taking over the family auction business. But his path totally shifts when someone close to him is killed, and we're drawn into kind of a high stakes quest involving hidden treasures, mysterious figures from the past, and then Chase's sidekick, uh, Dexter, Dax Thompson. So we call him Dax. Dax is like his right hand guy through the trenches. So they end up navigating kind of the dangerous world of high end auctions, and the criminal underworld kind of crosses paths. And then they end up in the midst of a situation where they're trying to prevent a global terrorist attack while uncovering truths that they left buried in Mosul, where they were serving in special ops. So it's kind of like a whole story of how the past comes back to haunt you, but then how do you move forward, kind of into this next part of your life. But at the end of the auctioneer, Chase is left with a choice. Uh, and not to give the ending away, he's got to make a choice. And we find out in King of the Night which path he's chosen. And then King of the Night picks up about 6 to 8 months after the auctioneer ends. So we drop you right in. You're back with the characters from the first book and a host of others.
Yeah, let's
So
talk King of the Night here, spoiler free, obviously, but give them the elevator pitch synopsis on King of the Night.
Sure. In the sequel of The Auctioneer, Chase now he's on a perilous global quest for revenge after an FBI agent is kidnapped. And him and Dax end up navigating kind of the world of international intrigue, political gamesmanship, and they end up facing like a formidable enemy that comes out of nowhere. And it requires them to kind of partner up with like shocking alliances. They uncover like devastating secrets that threaten to unravel kind of where we are here on the homeland. And Jeff, here's the crazy thing. This is not a spoiler, but part of the storyline includes a president who is weighing whether to run for a second term. So crazy because I finished writing the book, a year ago. Well, actually longer than a year ago. So now to see what's happening kind of in the news, I'm like, all right, that was kind of a wild
Yeah.
situation.
Did you predict that?
Yeah. Oh, well, and it's funny because in the Chase Hardiman world, President Bouchard, he's much younger. He's a mix. I kind of did this on purpose. He's a mix of both parties in one president. And so we're not playing favorites to either side, but
Yeah.
I wanted to create a president that kind of had all of it combined. And then to see what's happening now, I'm like, well, that ended up being a fun little part, story thread throughout, which is cool. And then at the end of King of the Night, I'm I'm betting I'm betting that readers will know where Chase and Dax are heading next in the third book. So I'm excited about that to hear, what people think. So
Yeah, I thought it was a very snappy thriller. I give you a good blurb that I thought was great, but
yeah,
that's
no, it's
I might be
perfect.
a little
No, I
biased.
appreciate it. Well, I've had like James Rollins has been great. He jumped on and gave an endorsement. He kind of said it's reminiscent of dropping Jack Reacher into a Tom Clancy novel. And then
Yeah,
Ryan
yeah,
Steck, both of us know Ryan. He runs the Real Book Spy, but then you and the Thriller Zone and Best Thriller Books, like you know, I'm I don't take any of those for granted, man. I so appreciate you taking
yeah.
the
I don't
time
give
to
out a lot of
read it.
blurbs. I mean,
Yeah,
I
no,
don't get asked a lot either. Let me be clear.
no, seriously, no,
I
no.
have been more lately, so I've kind of been a little more choosy. But yeah,
Well, and it's that thing of I never take it for granted, and I've given out some endorsements to other authors because when you've been in the trenches, like how hard it is to get people's attention, you
hmm,
know. And if you're not one of the top bestsellers, then you're on that constant hustle to like who else can share about the story or and,
yeah,
and hearing people's responses is just fun, so
yeah.
kind of hearing what you think about the book, which I would love to hear that. It's like hearing what other people think and just sitting back because it's usually different from what you expect, which is really cool.
I thought the way you described it as Jack Reacher dropped into a Clancy novel was good. I also
Mm-hmm.
think there's a little more intrigue to it than maybe an older school Clancy novel where I felt was a lot more of that techno thriller. Um,
Mm-hmm.
you learned how to build something or how something specific worked. That was just Clancy's thing. You can't do that today.
Yeah.
Today, um, the industry is a lot different. I was just talking to another author earlier today, and we were talking about the industry and how people's attention spans are much different than they were. One of
Mm-hmm.
Clancy's novels, I can't remember what it was. I want to say it was like Rainbow Six or something like that. The audiobook is like 30 hours long.
Oh my gosh,
Like
that's amazing.
you can't do that today. You
Yeah,
can't write an
no.
800 page book today. You know, certain people get away with it. Mark Greaney gets away with 400 plus pages, but that's because he's Mark Greaney, and people will read it. But I think for the average, well, not the average, the everybody else other than him and like a handful of people, um, you can't do that. And
Yeah.
attention spans, especially when you're a new author, you've got to grab them, pull them in quick, and then keep them because they're looking for the next thing. And we were talking earlier about novellas and short stories and how there could be a place in publishing for those, but publishing doesn't know what to do with them yet, or at least they
Mm.
haven't been vocal about it. Let's put it that way. I don't want to
Yeah.
burn any bridges or make anybody mad, but but they aren't as profitable as a $30 hardcover or a $20 paperback. So finding that in
Well,
there, how do we use it in your opinion as authors? How do we use it to our advantage?
I mean, to me, I would approach it like the way I write my novels, the chapters are like scenes in a film. So the chapters are short, it keeps you moving throughout. And I've thought about this for the Chase Hardiman series too. Is I had kind of a couple year window where I wasn't able to put any other books out because of the deal we had for the young adult series. Now that that series is written, Chase Hardiman's going to come out every year in September. But I have thought about what do you do to keep that series in front of people in between that yearly release?
Mm-hmm.
And that's where I could see, whether it's a novella I would even call it like a limited series, like an episodic series.
Yeah.
So you write kind of what happened. Say the auctioneer and King of the Night. Where was Chase and Dax in that 6 to 8 month window between books? You could just write that part of the story, and
Yeah,
and
I think you would. Filling in
I
some
think that
gaps would
could
be
work.
interesting.
Yeah,
Would
I think
definitely be
that could
interesting.
work. One thing, did you ever see Lost when it was on the air? The
I
show
know of it.
Lost.
I never watched it. No.
So one thing, and this was years ago, but J.J. Abrams was a genius. His whole way of creating his stories was he always wanted you to ask what's in the box, and he would never totally reveal what was in the box, right?
Right.
So in between the seasons, they had a site where they were putting out content in between the series, the seasons. And so
Little
you would go
snippets.
there and get all kinds of stuff that you wouldn't get, but it would fill the gaps in. It would take you on, you could explore one character a little more that they're not going to get deep into in the show.
Mm-hmm.
But, so things like that I've thought about. And that's where I would see, I think if you're writing a novella as like a one off, I think that's pretty tough. But if you're doing it as part of kind of your longer series, I think that could be really fun.
And I think the medium matters too. Like,
Hmm.
where do you publish that at? I think you know, there's obviously magazines, other blogs. You can start a blog on your own website. A couple thousand word short story to kind of fill in the gaps, could be done there. Obviously, it depends upon, your publisher and what they think and all that too, because they got
Hmm.
something at risk too. They don't want you going rogue on them. But I think that's a fun way to do it too. I like that.
Yeah, and I think the more one thing I've learned is like even with everyone's like you got to build your author platform. You've got to be on social. You've got to. It used to be they wanted you on every social platform, and then everyone realized you don't need to be on everything. You just need to focus on a couple of them and do them really well.
Yeah,
Um, but the social platforms could change tomorrow, and then what do you do?
sure can. Yeah.
And everything that I've read, just on branding and marketing, this is my preference. I think you drive them to one place, and that's to either your website or wherever your landing page is, and the social platforms and everything. That all should all funnel to that spot.
Yeah.
So then, if something changes a year from now, if X gets, it becomes illegal to be on X or whatever, your website, your domain where you're putting all your content, that's yours. It's never gonna get taken from you.
Yeah,
That's how I would do it.
that's where I have I do a blog post for um each episode, and that's where I put the links for social media, the links for all the main platforms of the episode: Spotify, Apple, YouTube, link for the book, link for your website.
Yep.
So it's a nice little rundown of a blog, and I share that link often so that I get the traffic going
Yep.
to that, and then there's sublinks off of that that you can go to. And I do share the main links every now and then, but my first initial post about a new episode is the blog
Oh yeah.
link, and I try to drive people to go to that first,
Well,
and not just because I get the traffic, but everything is there, including the
yeah.
link to buy your book, and that's the whole point of this show, this platform, is to tell stories of people and to celebrate their products. And I mean, I don't make any money off it, that's not the point, but
Well,
centralizes the idea.
and Jeff, the cool thing is as you're building everything out, like I've got two series and a couple audio books on my author site. When people go there, you don't know what they're going to gravitate to.
Yeah,
So they may gravitate straight for me. They may gravitate straight to Chase Hardiman, but they might be 50 years old but love the YA supernatural, and they might jump to the other series. Like having it all available. And the other piece of that I think is important because part of the production company, we're dealing with creative content all the time. Um, you have to make sure that your site and everything is mobile. So it might
mm-hmm.
look great on a desktop, but man, so many people these days, this is where you're going to get them.
Yeah,
So your site's got to look killer, and it's got to be easy to navigate and everything on a phone.
yeah.
And then everything else is gravy after that.
Yeah, I've had to fix some of
But
that on mine just because I thought it looked good, and then I didn't realize that like my web program doesn't convert it over to the best optimal,
mm,
for mobile. It does and it doesn't. If I align something to the left, it looks good on the web page. It looks bad on mobile. So I have to go in and I have to do things neutral. I can't get too
yeah,
fancy, which has been
yeah,
fine because it doesn't allow me to get too crazy with things. But
yeah.
yeah,
Keeps it clean. Keeps
yeah,
it
because
clean.
that's where I only come on here on a computer when I'm either writing and doing research or when I'm doing one of these shows. So I'm recording.
Mm,
I
um,
consume all my content off of mobile apps.
yeah. So Jeff, funny thing. So when I wrote The Disillusion, I think I wrote the first four novels on one of the iPad minis.
Oh wow!
I wrote the entire books on those, man.
Did you have a
So
little wireless
finally,
keyboard, or were you just tapping on the screen?
no, I was just tapping on the screen because
Oh man!
like I was traveling a lot, so I didn't want to take a bunch of we take enough gear when we go, so I'm like I just want something that I can slip in my backpack. It's easy, but I'm proud to say I have graduated up to the iPad Pro, and so that's where most of it happens now. I try and stay away from is just for me. I stay away from like we have a full edit suite and everything, and that's where my computer's at. I stay away from the computer because once I get on there, I am, I've got email, I've got other stuff that's rolling. Like all of a sudden, you're looking at everything else and you're not writing. And
Yeah,
so I set up my iPad basically where the iPad is for all the writing stuff and nothing else. I don't put anything on. So once, for me mentally, it's like I pick up the iPad, and when I do that, I know, okay, this is what I'm working on right now and don't get sidetracked.
I put my phone down. I put it like in the other room.
Mm,
Um, when I'm editing, a podcast episode, when I'm typing, or writing on a book project, I put it in the other room. That way, I'm not tempted, and I don't have social media loaded on my writing computer, and I keep all that on my laptop that I use just for the show because I try to keep those things separate. That way, I'm not tempted to go off in La La Land and scrolling or looking at TikTok or
mhm.
any of that nonsense while I'm trying to
No, it's
focus.
well, that's genius. Was it I watched an interview with Jack Carr, and maybe it's changed, but the interview I saw with him, he has two laptops, and one of them is just for the writing, and I don't even think it has like internet access. Like he turned all that stuff off, and then he uses the other one for work and stuff. And I don't, you know, I've never met him. I know like Ryan knows him real well and everything, and I'm so impressed with how he made that transition to not only write the books, which he's cranking them out, but he's one of the few authors that I've seen that has taken kind of the whole approach. Like he built a brand, he's done all the extra
Yeah.
stuff,
Well, Jack's
other
hiring the
than,
right people too by his side, and he's not.
yeah.
Jack's not. I guarantee you. I've never met Jack either. But I know this. He's got a team.
Oh yeah, no,
He's got
well, he
somebody
has to.
running his website and doing his social media and helping him
Yeah.
run his businesses because he's got
I
multiple
mean,
businesses too. Jack's
oh,
a full
totally.
blown entrepreneur. If you people don't know that, Jack's
Yeah.
got like a hunting resort in Hawaii that he co-owns and runs, and all kinds of other things that you guys do not know about. He is
Yeah.
truly got his hands in everything.
Well, and I wouldn't be surprised, when he first got into it, it depends how the whole deal worked out. But, when you first get into it, it's happened to all of us. Like you do everything, you do all of it,
Yeah,
and, which is good because when he's brought in other people as part of his team, and then we have just with my stuff, we have a crew of guys that take on like doing the trailers and all that kind of stuff. Um, when you've done it yourself, you have a whole different level of respect for the people that step in and take it over for you because you're like, I know how that feels. You know what I mean? It's like
yeah,
I've cut trailers before. I get it,
yeah,
So yeah, but I've been really impressed with just his whole approach,
yeah.
which
He's got it figured out.
yeah, I don't know if you'll ever replicate that, at that kind of pace because he's working on scripts, he's writing books, and like he said, he's got other business ventures, he's got all the stuff that you can get on the site that aren't book related.
Yeah.
It's like it's amazing.
Well, he's a modern day Tom Clancy equivalent. Because
Yeah,
Clancy,
totally.
when he, in his heyday, had all the movies, he had the video games. I'm sure he had swag and other things like that. I can't remember totally what he was into, but Jack's the modern day version of Clancy. He's the books are just a sliver.
Oh, totally. And I think, what I've seen with him, and this is something, even because I've written with other authors too, uh, and when we're in production on a pilot or whatever, collaboration is the whole deal.
Mm-hmm.
If you can collaborate with people, and it's especially for creative people, it's hard sometimes to be like, well, wait a minute, so you're going to change my story, or you're telling me I got to do this or whatever. If you come in with kind of a sense of collaboration, what I've found on the projects I've worked on and the books I've worked on is when it's finished, the end product is way better, you know,
Yeah,
but it's just that initial part where you have to come in and tell yourself, I'm here to collaborate with everyone in the room.
yeah.
And man, if you can do that, then some good stuff can happen for sure.
Well, DJ, before I let you go, let's talk about your website and where people can go to find more about you, follow along all the Chase Hardiman news and future projects.
Sure. Website is djwilliamsbooks.com. Instagram and X is where I spend most of my time on social. So those are both DJ Williams Books. And we've got some fun things planned for the King of the Night release. The trailer came out a couple weeks ago. Like, this is all, how it is. This is all ramping up, and like you said, the first 30 days is big deal to get it out to everybody. And
Big deal.
and I've started to outline book three. I already know what book three is. So now the temptation is don't dive in too fast. Let's get this one out into the
Yeah.
world.
Yeah,
So
absolutely. Well, man, thanks for stopping by. I appreciate it. Good, best of luck with King of the Night. Thanks for sending me a copy of it, and we'll do this again next year when you got the next one coming out. Keep me posted.
awesome, Jeff. Thanks for having me on.